Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast, Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we examine line-of-duty deaths of firefighters to learn from these tragedies so they can be potentially prevented. This is going to be episode 88 of our 5th season. We're starting our 5th season, and we're going to go to Iowa. We've never been to Iowa before, so we're going to go to Clinton, Iowa in January of 2019. But before we get too deep into the episode, let's welcome our hosts. And so we're joined again by, it's not just Waldorf and Statler this time. We've got someone along with us. So it's myself, Paul, and we have Denis, my cousin, retired fire chief, now in Nova Scotia. Hello, Denis. How are you?
I'm very good, Paul. Thank you very much. First episode of the new year, right? So
Yeah.
and it's great. We're multiplying on this end. The old guys are multiplying, so I have to get a bigger balcony.
That's right. We will. Yeah. So, and then we have another host who's joined us, I think, once before, right? Dennis. Hi, Dennis. Dennis is also a retired fire chief, although he's a little younger than us guys. We got like a 30-year spread between the three here or so. But he's semi-retired. He still teaches for Nate like I do, and teaches incident command and does exercise and all that stuff. And welcome back to the show, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's been a while, but it's always fun to come back with you guys. And somebody's got to keep you two on the straight and narrow, right?
This is the truth. That is for sure. Okay, well, we have some current events, of course. There's the tragic nightclub fire in Switzerland a couple of days ago on New Year's Eve, with over 40 dead and 113 injured. It just, it's a tragedy again, but as a fire prevention officer, safety codes officer, whatever, it just drives me nuts that it's the same thing over and over and over. Flammable material inside the building, in that they were using sparklers inside of champagne bottles and they got it too close to the ceiling. It looks like, this is preliminary, the ceiling was that eggshell kind of foam sound abatement material. And it caught fire. Yeah, egg crate material, just like the Station nightclub in Rhode Island. The material in Rhode Island wasn't fire rated. They bought the cheaper stuff, and it was in place, and people went there, and pyrotechnics lit it off. And here, a similar fact. Actually, I did Wikipedia while I was waiting to get on the podcast here, just to say, I wrote, fatal nightclub fires on Wikipedia, and there was hundreds. I couldn't believe it. Like, we don't learn from our lessons. And there was dozens and dozens and dozens that were pyrotechnics or fireworks or open flame inside the building. How do we fix this?
Basement nightclub, single stairwell to get out. There's video. I saw a video that was taken by some of the patrons inside. There's a life-threatening fire, and they're standing there taking videos of it.
With their phone.
Seriously?
It was the same in Calgary.
Dancing around, yeah.
It was the same in Calgary in that flood. They had a huge water main break, and they had people videoing it inside their cars. They're waiting for rescue. They're in their cars, and they got their cameras, and they're videoing it instead of getting out of their car before they get drowned. It's just nuts.
Well, haven't you guys seen the new safety signs they're putting up in buildings? And it's a joke. It's a meme. But it says, if there's a fire, please evacuate the building before you take a selfie.
Yeah.
Like,
crazy.
It's like the common sense just isn't there anymore. But it looks like, I just did a quick search here. They're looking at several days to unfortunately have to identify all the bodies, right?
Yeah, because they're all burned and they're all tourists.
They say some of them are so bad it's going to be DNA only.
Yeah.
So,
tragic.
Seriously?
I'm glad I'm not there.
And,
Yeah. Terrible. Other current events, let's see. Firefighters and officers fired in Marion County, Florida over hazing incident that occurred last year. They were waterboarding people and beating people and crazy stuff. The department has a zero tolerance for hazing or proby stuff. And yet these people were doing it. They fired a battalion chief, a captain, a lieutenant, even though just because some of them were just there. They were just in the building, so good for Marion County to set an example, but this must have been going on. It's terrible.
Yeah. As officers, you've got responsibilities. It's the same if you're in the officer's seat of a truck and your driver does something he shouldn't be doing. You can't just sit there and ignore it. If you're an officer in the station, or an officer in the department, or a chief officer, or of any responsibility, you have responsibilities. You don't just pretend, oh, well, that's what we always do. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And if you don't know it's wrong, you're in the wrong place.
Exactly. Yep. Terrible.
Complacency is not an excuse, right?
Yeah.
Well, the big thing is just letting it happen when you see it and not doing something about it. That's the biggest leadership lesson, really, is to, set the tone and be consistent.
Well, when they say, you inspect what you expect.
Yeah. If you don't take action on discipline, then what you don't take action on becomes the norm, becomes accepted.
Exactly.
And that's been proven, of course. There's an important announcement, I think, that's important to Canadian firefighters, and it was in the last Firefighting in Canada release, and it talks about there's like a new registry in Canada, StatsCan, and the Canadian Firefighters Association are getting together to introduce a national framework on cancers linked to firefighting. They're looking at this and they're creating a registry. So any firefighters who have had cancer, past or present, they want to record all of those and understand what's going on in the pattern of cancer in firefighters in Canada. And it's a project that's just getting off the ground, but it's got $3.5 million been allocated towards it from the federal government. So, and StatsCan already has a registry on cancer in general.
Right.
This is going to be focused in on firefighter cancer, and I think it's going to go. It'll go a lot further towards helping to understand the patterns, if you will, and maybe eventually get a better handle on the causes. Because right now there's a lot of presumptive cancers, right? But I'm not sure that the prevalence of this is completely known. And I've talked to people who didn't even know that there was coverage for some of these things too. So
yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, most of the provinces have got some sort of presumptive cancer legislation, but it's not uniform across the country, and that causes problems as well. There was 2 or 3 fire apparatus crashes in Canada just right around Christmas time there. We had a lot of icy, bad roads. There was one here north of Edmonton, Sturgeon County, had a commercial engine of some sort roll off the road into the ditch. It rolled over. Fortunately, I didn't hear of any significant injuries, so that was good. Although, it does put the jurisdiction out of a truck as well. And luckily they survived and it didn't involve anybody else. There was one in Mirabel, Quebec, I think it was. It was a cab over, the old GMC Isuzu cab over engine that slid off a road, icy road as well, and laid on its side in a ditch. And I think there was I don't know if it was in Nova Scotia, that other one where it was a Ford cab over tender, a tandem, laying on its side. I saw a picture of it, so I'm not sure if that's where it was. The Calgary water emergency again. So it's really not firefighting related, but it is because they need water to fight fires. And so Calgary, Chestermere, Airdrie are all on level 4 water restrictions because of a water main. Calgary had a water main break a year ago or two, and now a connector main to that main has now failed. And so they're in low water situations. And Calgary, like many cities, doesn't have a lot of tender trucks to haul water. So if they get a big fire, it's going to put a big stress on the fire department. We need to be ready for that.
Makes you wonder if they're actually quickly sourcing some mutual aid contracts or some contractors to supply water tenders.
I saw some contractors providing, potable water at their water refill stations. There was some contractor trucks, but I was just specifically thinking about firefighting. I know when I taught the planning section course in Calgary in November, several of the staff there had participated in the emergency during the last time, and they said they actually had the fire department going around and checking hydrants, trying to figure out which areas had water and which areas didn't and stuff like that. Other thing, speaking of infrastructure, it's a kind of a unique story, but it tweaked my mind because of the course I'm teaching for Nate this winter, is the power out in Cross Lake First Nation. That's not the proper First Nation name for it, but that's the English name for it, if you will, or what it's known by. Out for days because a major power line over a river had failed, and they had struggled to get heavy equipment in there. They had to use all helicopters to rebuild it. But this poor community was without power for days and days, and it was really, really cold. And specifically to the emergency traffic podcast is what's your resiliency for your fire station? Do you have backup power for your fire station so that the apparatus can still function? They don't freeze up. I remember in Quebec in '88 when they had the ice storm, fire trucks were freezing in the stations everywhere because they didn't have backup power. So fire stations are critical infrastructure, especially in a remote community. They need to have backup power for heat and electricity to operate everything, and they need to have alarms and low temp and high temp alarms. We lost that station we talked about last episode in Redwood Meadows, where their station burned in the middle of the night. So fire stations are critical infrastructure, folks. So I'll get on my soapbox here with my little stool because I'm not that agile anymore and say, make sure you have backup power for your fire stations.
But not only that, you've got to consider if you have an infrastructure failure like that at a First Nations remote community, and your power lines are going from island to island across bodies of water, how long would it reasonably take to restore such a power outage? And it might be more than your conventional 72 hours.
Oh yeah, it was days and days, and they were shipping generators and fuel and heater and all kinds of stuff to this remote community. It's kind of between Winnipeg and Thompson, 700 kilometers north of Winnipeg, south of Thompson, in a remote area. So yeah, it's tough. They were evacuating a lot of people. A lot of the homes, I saw some video, didn't appear to have wood stoves, maybe, and therefore the people couldn't sustain themselves. So they had to do something, right?
Yeah. Like in the 2023 wildfire that we had here, we had a major power outage because they cut the power to blocks, and my propane powered generator ran for 14 days. And I never allow it to get below a certain level, so I always have at least 10 days of running capability.
Right.
And so, but typically speaking, our power outages around here are 4 or 5 hours at the most type thing.
I think Denis should be a keynote speaker for our emergency management students at Nate. Dennis, what do you think? You know, he has a generator. He fire smarted his property, so all the houses around him burned down, and his property is still standing. And he never had to lose the contents of a freezer. Everything was great. I mean, you are the model citizen for a wildland urban interface area.
Yeah,
I'm just
hoping. And the firefighters came by, tried to shut off my generator.
No, what's a hazard? Got to shut that off.
So much so that they bent the cover on it trying to get it open. It's locked closed.
Luckily, they were locked and you couldn't get in. Oh my God!
They shut the gas off, and they kept trying to restart. And so they tried to open the cover to turn it off. They couldn't, so they turned the gas back on, and it started and continued running.
Oh my goodness!
And I assume this is all what happened based on the fact that the gas valve there's a tie on it to keep you from closing it,
right?
And so that had been cut, and the top of the generator had been bent because somebody had been reefing on it. So anyway,
wow, firefighter training. Here we go.
I might have gone past your place when I was out there doing recovery, disaster response and recovery there with Team Rubicon. We were out into town.
Oh, you would have been in my subdivision.
Absolutely.
Rubicon was.
Yeah.
I think I was there. I might even have a picture of your house in my phone somewhere, because being out there, you know, when you go out, you know, do disaster response, I mean, you bring your skills and your life experiences with you, but you know, you're not a fire guy anymore. You're a disaster responder. And I'm thinking I might have taken a picture of your house thinking, look how this was fire smarted and survived. And then all the houses around were gone. So if I find it, I'll get you to autograph it or something. And
right on. I like it. Okay. Well, we better get down to the subject at hand here. Let's go to Clinton, Iowa on January 5th of 2019. So 6 years ago, I guess now, an industrial silo fire and subsequent explosion killed a 33-year-old lieutenant. Eric Hosette was his name. And critically injured a 23-year-old firefighter. His name was Adam Kane. The information for this episode is derived from the NIOSH report, local newspaper articles, firefighter close calls, and the Iowa OSHA report. Clinton is a city in the county seat of Clinton County, Iowa, United States. It borders the Mississippi River. In fact, these silos are right beside the Mississippi River. And the population in 2020 was 24,469 people.
So the fire department, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So it's a career fire department, even though it's a small population. It's actually been a career fire department since the 1800s. I think I was discovering. So a long
Wow,
time anyways.
yeah, a lot of career fire departments in the eastern United States,
Yeah.
if that's eastern.
Anyway, it protects a 36 square mile jurisdiction, which is clearly quite a bit outside of the city itself, and serves a population around 26,500. So the population outside of the city is very thin. Anyway, they annually respond to an average of around 4,600 calls, and they provide emergency medical services as well. The fire department maintains 3 stations, with each being designated as a company. In other words, Station 1, Company 1, Station 2, Company 2, that kind of thing. Well, Station 3, Company 3. Okay, I'll go that far. The jurisdiction is divided into territories, or districts, if you will, for each station, and the location of fire and EMS calls dictates which station responds, and this is all decided by department's SOG and box alarm assignments. So well organized that way. So the fire department is comprised of 45 uniformed career personnel, and they maintain 3 shifts, an ABC shift. Each shift is staffed by 14 personnel, up to, with a minimum of 11 on duty per shift across the 3 stations. Shifts operate on a 24 on from 7 to 7 in the following day, and then they would be off for the next 2 days, right? So each shift is assigned 1 battalion chief, 3 lieutenants, that would be 1 per station, 5 engineers, which is 1 for each of the major apparatus, and 7 firefighters. The fire department's leadership contains a fire chief with 2 assistant chiefs who also serve as the training EMS director and the fire marshal city safety director, in other words, responsible for fire prevention. The fire department and its operations are established through the local ordinances, or bylaws as we say them here in Canada. These ordinances include direction on auto aid and mutual aid agreements, training, compensation, appointment and duties of the fire chief, designation of fire inspectors, and authorization to provide emergency ambulance and rescue services. The fire department has a comprehensive set of internal written policies and guidelines that provide direction for incident command, general incident responses, communications, emergency operations, and general administration.
Hey, thanks, Danny. I'll talk a little bit about some training, education, and some of the professional development they've got on the go there. So the department maintains a training division that provides initial training and continuing skills development for all firefighters, all fire officers, and all EMS personnel. The initial training for recruits consists of 6 weeks of daily academy-type training for a total of 240 hours. Recruits are given 50 hours of general knowledge testing, address tests, and skill drills that are completed during their first 10 months on shift. The fire department's written policies provide professional development, requirements for driver operators, and some other skills as well. The fire department utilizes Iowa's requirements for recruitment, selection, promotion, and retention for all civil service classified employees. Local ordinance dictates requirements for promotion to firefighters first class. This ordinance states that fire department employees shall obtain certification as firefighter level 1, firefighter level 2, and Iowa paramedic before they can obtain promotion from a probationary member status. Local ordinance dictates that the fire chief shall be appointed by the city administrator with approval of the local council. So looking at Battalion 1 Incident Commander, I had 27 years of total fire service and experience at the fire department, with the last 8 years as a battalion chief of B shift. He maintained training in the incident command system and held numerous certifications as firefighter level 1, firefighter level 2, incident safety officer, leadership 1, 2, and 3, fire investigator, fire instructor, fire officer 1 and 2, fire apparatus driver, operator, aerial and pumper apparatus, and the Iowa and Illinois State Emergency Medical Paramedic Provider, and the Iowa Fire Service Training Bureau instructor and an instructor evaluator. Company 3 Lieutenant Eric is Hosette. Is that right, Paul? Hosette?
Yeah, I think so. Who's that?
Yeah, the deceased firefighter had 12 years of total fire service, with the department holding the ranks of firefighter, engineer, and lieutenant. He maintained training in the incident command system and held numerous certifications as firefighter 1 and 2, incident safety officer, leadership 1, 2, and 3, fire investigator, fire and emergency services instructor, fire officer 1 and 2, fire apparatus driver, operator, aerial and pump apparatus, and the Iowa and Illinois State Emergency Medical Paramedic Provider. Firefighter Adam Kane, who is a critically injured firefighter, joined the department in November of 2017, and at that time of the incident was almost 2 years on the job. He maintained training in the incident command system and held numerous certifications such as Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, and the Iowa and Illinois State Emergency Medical Paramedic Provider.
So a lot. I mean, these guys were well trained. A good department. They've got lots of good training. They got multiple stations to cover their response times, all that kind of stuff. Really set up like it looks like a very well operated department.
It's also quite a lot of industry in this community too, right? So,
yes, it's a big agricultural area. Iowa, of course. Yeah, exactly. Agrarian area. And on the Mississippi River and stuff. So the wheat belt and industry belt of the United States, really. Let's see, apparatus staffing and communications. So at 5:46 hours, the following units were dispatched to a fire in number 2 silo in the germ pit area of a corn processing facility. This facility was owned by ADM, one of several large facilities in Clinton processing agricultural products. So they dispatched 2 aerials, 54 and ladder 54, 59. They each had 3 firefighters on them. So we don't have minimum staffing. We got people in stations, but the staffing is low. 1 engine 46 with only 2 firefighters on it, 2 ambulances, each with 1 firefighter, and 1 battalion chief. So what do we got?
11.
11? Low for a big industrial fire. That's for sure.
And those it caught my attention right away that they 2 ladders and 1 engine, not 2 engines and 1 ladder.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. They must run them as quints.
I did a little more digging, and they're more like quints.
Yeah, quints.
I mean, like 500-gallon tanks, 1,200-gallon pumps, that type of thing. U.S. gallon, I might say.
Yeah, that's what Regina runs. In each station, they had or not each station, but in several stations, they had an engine and a quint. And I said, well, why are you buying these 75-foot quints? And they said, well, because if the engine's out on a call all the time, we have something that we can use for the second out. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Anyway, they each arrived within 7 minutes of each other into the construction of the silo. So the silo construction characteristics and maintenance. Silos are used for preservation, storage, and disbursement of organic materials such as foodstuffs. Silos can be used for storage of materials such as coal, powdered mixes. There are 3 types of vertical upright silos in the agricultural industry, according to Murphy and Arbel in 2000. And NIOSH in 2012. And we did a silo fire. You reminded me of that, Denis. That was in 2023 episode, I can't remember now.
35.
It was two silos that we did in that incident.
Episode
right?
35 it was in October of 23. And there was a total in that case of 5 firefighters died in those 2 incidents. And the similarities to this incident are exact. And they were on top of the silos, and it all went bad from there.
It's why I wanted to do this, because we need to increase the awareness of silo fires. Actually, I mean, I was a fire chief for emergency services for 36, 37, 38 years, somewhere in there. And here in Lacombe, the fire chief called me soon after I retired and said, hey, Paul, I got this silo fire out of town here. You got any ideas what we can do? And I'm going, I've never fought a silo fire in my life. I'm really not qualified to tell you. I would look for some nitrogen and fill it with nitrogen, but that's up to you.
And if you go back, and I encourage you to go back and read and listen to the episode 35, because some of the information you're going to hear following now is a bit of a repeat from there, but we also provide you with direct resources to go and get further educated in that episode, if I remember correctly. And there are places you can Google on how to deal with silo fires, and it's produced by the silo industry, who pretty much know what they're talking about.
So if you've got silos in your area as part of your pre-planning and disaster preparedness mitigation, you should know what to do. Here we go.
Yeah, don't be Googling at 3 a.m. when it's on fire. Do it now.
Right, right.
And then
Let's
get
see.
out your pen and write it down.
So, three types of silos. Conventional silos are typically constructed of concrete staves with pretension steel hoops around them. They can be also constructed of bricked, glazed tiles, or wood, which we see commonly in older farm areas. They feature a fabricated domed roof for weather protection, or they are open at the top. They often feature external unloading chute with their silage unloaded from the top. So those are really common in a lot of farms. You see those, especially in the older areas, or for non-foodstuff products. You see those a lot. You have oxygen limiting silos or sealed silos. These have design features to limit the exposure of the silage to outside air, which creates an oxygen deficient environment inside the silo. They are often constructed of poured reinforced concrete staves, or enamel coated steel. You see those big blue silos, what are they, harvest or mangrove harvest store or something out on the farms?
Yeah, and that's for fermentation, so they don't want oxygen in there. They
Right.
will load that up with silage, and the weight of it is supposed to push the oxygen out to keep it from spoiling. And then the feed stuff burns inside. We had one of those fires here back when I was just a volunteer with the town of Pinoca Fire Department, and that was a tricky situation. We were able to isolate it. We had to bring out the aerial ladder truck, the telesquirt, and we were able to isolate the area because, again, hay stuffs, if you cut it too early and the moisture content's not right, it will spontaneously
Yeah.
combust, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
and that was a problem.
Which is why you limit the oxygen so it can't combust on its own. These silos do not have outside chutes and typically have bottom unloaders that remove the silage from the bottom using augers and conveyor systems. The fill and unloading hatches are usually sealed with clamps and gaskets to limit that airflow, hence the oxygen limiting factor. We have also modified oxygen limiting silos. Are those that were used as oxygen limiting silo but have been converted to a conventional silo. Based on the construction and limited access points for oxygen, in this case, NIOSH investigators believe the incident silo to be oxygen limiting or sealed.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the incident and the silo characteristics. So the corn processing facility, which is Archer Daniels Midland NDM, used 6 side by side, so they're in a row, silos, and they were used for the temporary storage of products and their byproducts prior to being loaded onto river barges for transport. So, drying and separating and extracting or whatever else they did with this material, they were held in these silos, and they moved from silo to silo as the processes continued. And then there was a transport where you could a conveyor to take it out to the barges. So the silos, each of them, were 94.5 feet tall, pretty tall then, higher than most aerials would reach, 24 feet in diameter, and could each hold up to 500 tons of product. So they were rebar reinforced concrete walls, which were 13 inches thick, and there was a 7-inch poured concrete cap over each silo, so sealing the top. So silos 1 and 2 in the row of 6 contained corn gluten feed pellets. Silos 3 through 5 contained a germ product, which is the heart of the corn itself, and silo 6 contained earthen materials in a silica form for mixing in, I guess. At the time of the incident, silo number 2 contained only 2 to 4 tons of corn gluten feed pellets. I'm just going to give you a little comment here on germ that I did a little research on, Paul. And germ is the kernel part of the corn. So if you cut a piece of kernel corn in half, you can see the germ is that little part down near the bottom. And it's basically the seed part, the part that will grow of the corn itself. But it's high in oil content and is a feed supplement, a nutritious feed supplement for cattle and hogs and so forth. But it has a high oil content, and corn does in general. And so that's something to remember because raw processed or uncooked, basically unheated raw organic oils can spontaneously combust under the right conditions, like raw linseed oil, not boiled linseed oil, but raw linseed oil. So as firefighters, we'd be well aware that these are spontaneous combustion risks. Anyway, the 6 silos were connected by 2 conveyor systems, one on the top and one on the bottom of the silos. The conveyor system above the silos was in a raised hallway known as a head house, and that moved product from silo to silo or into each silo. So, drop in the top through a hatch that's controlled. So the head house for silo number 2, which I remind you is the incident silo, had 2 access hatches, and each measured 1 foot by 1 foot and had a slide gate for a conveyor discharge that measured 2 feet by 2 feet. So very small openings on the top, and that's consistent with the oxygen limiting silo. And these had a hatch, so you don't normally leave them open. They're open when you're using them, then you close them. So the conveyor system on the bottom of the silos was contained in a tunnel that moved along underneath the silos, and it moved products from the silo to the river barges, so along the bottom and then up probably an escalator and then out to the barges. Silo number 2 contained 3 lower discharge slide gates, each measured 8 inches by 12 inches, not large. And these allowed product to flow out of the silo down and into the conveyor tunnel and thence onto the conveyor. Each slide gate also had an access inspection port in them. So you didn't have to open the gate to find out it was full. You could open a port, stuff come out, you knew it was full. So silo 2 had a side access hatch also, which was about 2 feet by 3 feet and was approximately 13 feet off the ground. Remember, the silos are 95 feet high, so 13 up, quarter of the way up. Finally, along the riverside of 4 of the silos, there was a fiberglass awning that came out from the side of the silos. So that's important because that's the side where the road access is, and this would interfere with your aerial truck access to the silos.
Speaking of aerial trucks, it's really too bad Doug's not here because I'm looking at the picture carefully. It's a Bronto. They have a Bronto, which is awesome. I'm all excited because now I remember why I knew the name Clinton, because they have a Bronto. And of course, everyone knows that I'm in love with Brontos. So anyway,
Dad, it's retired now.
Ouch. Yeah, well, it's so probably old. We sold a ton of those around 2000 to 2008. Yeah.
If you go to Fire Wiki, you'll find out that it's on the old I'm retired list.
Aw. Anyway.
We resemble that.
Yeah, I do. I resemble that remark. Denny, you want to continue with silent maintenance, and then we'll change subjects with Dennis.
Okay, so talking about the maintenance of these silos, in other words, how the silos are used, always a key factor in any incident in silos. So 3 months prior to this incident, the corn processing facility had discovered an agglomerated mass of pellets known as a bridge. So, it's like solid, it crosses the silo or it's in the silo, and loose material flows around it, but this big bridge stays up there and eventually gets bigger and causes the problem. So the bridge hindered the flow of corn gluten feed pellets from the silo into the lower discharge gates. So they weren't getting the product out of the bottom they expected to. But over a 3-month period, the facility had hired several contractors in order to remove the pellet bridge and to clean the silo. These contractors used a series of methods to break up the bridge, including high pressure air, drills, and water hoses. The residual water and products were vacuumed out of the silo through the lower conveyor system by a suction truck. The contractors were successful in reducing the size of the bridge, but were not able to completely remove it. 2 of these contractors, one of them was a very experienced silo cleaning and mitigation contractor. The other one was more a general contractor whose basic claim to fame was they used vacuum trucks and so forth. They had vacuum trucks. So, but at the time of the incident, only the general contractor was the one who was on site. So in January 4 of 2019, the contractor crews reportedly left for the night and left the side hatch access for silo number 2 open. Remember, this is supposed to be a closed silo. When the contractor crews returned in the morning of the incident, they reported observing white smoke pushing out and smoldering burning materials following from the discharge slide gates. So the silo caught fire overnight, or was on fire, and the fire increased, one of the two. Upon arrival of the facility supervisor who worked for ADM, they entered the conveyor tunnel and discovered over 6 feet of burning product from the bottom of the silo to the floor of the tunnel. So burning materials falling out into the conveyor system at the bottom and still burning. Probably not a good thing. The facility supervisor then notified security to call 911 to report a fire in the germ pit area.
Definitely not a good thing. Let's call the fire department.
Yeah.
Let's look at their personal protective equipment. So at the time of the incident, both firefighters were wearing full structural firefighting turnout gear. Both firefighters were wearing the NIOSH-approved MSA Model G1, 45-minute or 4,500 PSI SCBA, There was no evidence was suggested that the SCBA units inspected and evaluated contributed to the fatality or the near miss. So this stuff seemed to be in good order. When we're looking at weather conditions on that day, at 05:52 hours on January 5th, 2019, the outdoor temperature was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The dew point was 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind was out of the southwest at 5 miles per hour. There had been no precipitation in the last 24 hours, and conditions were fair.
Cool. They don't really say anything about moisture content in the air, but let's see.
Well, with the dew point at the same as the temperature, it must have been just like practically foggy or almost foggy.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, like 90% something. Yeah.
And right on the banks of the river, and
yeah,
it was probably a raw day.
Pretty moist and cool.
I was going to give you guys a hard time here. A lot of no metric in here for the Canadian listeners, eh?
Oh, I forgot to put that in.
I'm sorry, we can do something about that, eh?
Yeah. Well, the 32 would be 0 Fahrenheit. So here we go. Let's go to the call. So at 5:45 hours, the PSAP, Public Service Answering Point, received a 911 call from security at the corn processing facility reporting a fire in the germ pit area of the refinery. They called it a refinery. The security guard requested responding fire units to meet him at the main entrance, and they would be escorted to the incident area of the facility. A minute later, 546, dispatched Battalion 1, Ladder 54, Ladder 59, Engine 46, Ambulance 1, Ambulance 2 were all dispatched to a fire in a silo in the germ pit area of number 2 silo, in the area of the corn processing facility. Ladder 54 and Ambulance 2 arrived on scene within 7 minutes. They were escorted to the incident area by a security guard, and Battalion 1 arrived on scene a minute later, followed Ladder 54 to the incident area. Battalion 1 established command and set up the command post 500 feet away from the incident silo. Upon arrival at the incident area, Ladder 54's crew began a scene size-up with the facility employees. A facility supervisor met command at the command post to provide a briefing on the events leading up to the incident and what was known about the fire. He explained that over a period of 3 months, the facility hired a contractor to remove the bridge of pellets that had formed and clean Silo 2. At 5:30 hours that morning, 15 minutes after the time of call, the contractor crew noticed smoldering burn material and a fire in the silo, which prompted the facility to call 911. Command radioed to Ambulance 1, requesting that upon arrival they report to command post and perform accountability for the incident commander. So basically a fire field incident technician role. Also requested all fire units on scene to switch over to Fireground 3, a tactical channel for incident communications. Ladder 59, Ambulance 1, and Engine 46 arrived a few minutes later. After completing their size-up, Ladder 54 reported to the command post to discuss their plan for fire suppression in the silo. The facility supervisor explained that there was some germ product in the bottom of the silo which they believed was on fire. He explained that they believed the product was on the sides of the silo as opposed to being level at the bottom. In response, Ladder 54 noted that a plate or access inspection port had been removed from the bottom of the silo just before the conveyor system. The facility supervisor agreed that this location would be safe to flow water into the silo and noticed the conveyor system was shut down, so they had a lockout, tagout thing going on. Ladder 54 returned to the incident area and deployed an 1 3/4 hose line to the bottom of the silo to begin flowing water. They began extinguishing the smoldering materials that had fallen around the conveyor system and then directed the fire into the silo through the access inspection port to put out the fire. Command requested the location of the nearest hydrant from the facility supervisor, which was determined to be on the west side of the silo. At about 24 minutes after time of call, command requested that Ladder 59 assist Engine 46 in securing the water supply from the hydrant to Ladder 54. So 59 was set up and 54 was going to pump or assist 46. While the water supply was being secured, Ladder 54 continued to apply water into the bottom of the silo, flowing 90 to 100 gallons per minute. So what is that in liters? 400 liters a minute?
Practically nothing.
Nothing, yeah. Well, go into an industrial fire with residential tactics.
Yeah. Well, they don't have a secure water supply. They're just running on tank water.
Right, yeah. So. Only 3 trucks, yeah. Ladder 59, engine 46, confirmed to command water supply was secured to ladder 54 12 minutes later. This was accomplished with a 300-foot hose lay of 5-inch supply line. Command then requested ladder 59 and 46 to report to the command post.
This is a difficult site, because the entrance to the facility is some like 10 blocks north of where the actual fire is, because the address of the facility is 4th Avenue, and where the fire is opposite 14th. So it's a ways away.
Yeah, and it's a maze of pipe racks and buildings everywhere and sheds and
And the hydrants, not on a roadway that's where they are. So they had to hand stretch this 300-foot line, through the facility, around supports and machinery and fences and pipes and whatever else there was. So so it took them a while to get that established. So, but nobody knew, of course, how long this thing had been burning, right? I mean, we're saying, they sat and did something with it for 15 minutes before they called it in, but that sounds like a delayed alarm, but one doesn't really know exactly how long this has been going on. So anyways.
More about that later.
Yeah. So they established a unified command structure. So in this case, that means between the fire department and the facility people. So that's what that means. So fire department's responding to, I was a refinery fire chief for 11 years. And when you're responding to a major facility like this, in many cases, we wouldn't even let the municipal fire department into the site, because they just, unless we needed them, because they just wouldn't know enough about the incident and could seriously get themselves in difficulty. So having a unified command where both sides are conferring before they go and do anything, seriously important thing to do on large industrial sites. So this unified command structure developed at the command post with the addition of the facility command and safety officer. So this is the guy there. So at 51 minutes after the time of the call, the facility command requested the contractor crew come back and bring their suction truck to the incident area. They needed to remove the water and other extinguished product from the conveyor tunnel where it was collecting underneath the silo, where Ladder 54 crew were working. Command requested a status report, and Ladder 54 looked into the silo at that time and noticed that air was being drawn, sucked in, and that there was still active fire inside. Air is being sucked in. Must be open at the top then, right? Ladder 54 responded to command that they did not think the water application was working. They weren't using a very large line. They decided to shut the hand line down and return to the command post, and they exited the conveyor tunnel to do that. So all this time they're working in a confined space under the silo. That's what they're doing.
Exactly. Scary if you'd never been there before.
Yeah. Anyway, so 8 minutes later, Ladder 54 noticed that there was a side access hatch. That's the one at the 13-foot level that was present on the river-facing side of the silo. So like I said, about 13 feet above ground, so they could get access to it. So command asked the facility supervisor if this hatch could be utilized to flow water into the silo, but the facility supervisor stated that it may be too dangerous to open the hatch because the facility was unaware of what was behind it and was concerned about burning products spilling out onto whoever opened the hatch. So if they opened the hatch, the whole raft of burning material might have fallen out onto the firefighters and onto the ground too. This is part of a chain of bad information, actually, that we'll find out about later. Anyway, so the contractor crew's suction truck arrived on scene about 5 minutes later. So back at the command post, it was decided that the fire suppression tactics would change to flowing water through an access hatch on the top of the silo. So instead of continuing to push water up from the bottom, they're going to go up on the roof and push water down through the ventilation hole. That's what they were going to do.
Fill her up, Buttercup.
Anyway, you're going to find out, particularly if you go back and look at the previous silo episode that we did, that putting water in through the top is a bad idea. Anyway, the plan was to set up Ladder 59 and use its standpipe, its waterway, to run hose above the catwalk on the top of the silo. Remember, this silo is 95 feet high. This was estimated to require about 200 feet of 3-inch hose if Ladder 59 could reach the catwalk. Command requested Ladder 59 and Engine 46 to shut down and to move themselves to put the supply line from Ladder 54 into position. The contractor crew suction truck then entered the incident area and staged parallel against the silo. So they moved the vacuum truck right up against the silo itself. The truck began vacuuming up the water and the product that was running out of the bottom of the silo so that the conveyor system did not flood. Up in staging, command was notified that ladder 15 was not able to reach the catwalk. In response, command requested that ladder 59 be removed from the incident and ladder 54 return. So I believe ladder 54 is that Bronto, Paul.
A little taller. It might be a 114 or something.
Yeah. So at an hour and 17 minutes after arrival, command entered the incident area to conduct a size up themselves of the silos. This would be Battalion 1. Battalion 2, rather. No, Battalion 1, right. And develop a strategy. He observed a landing near the top of the silo, which he believed ladder 54 could reach. This area would be just short of the top of the silo, but it was about 10 or 15 feet from the catwalk. At an hour and 18 minutes after arrival, Battalion 2 arrived, so this is the relief because it's shift change. On scene due to shift change and proceeded to the command post to relieve Battalion 1. He was briefed on the current status of the incident and the new plan of using ladder 54 as a standpipe, which would allow a hose line to flow water into the top of the silo. The facility safety officer showed Battalion 2 a hand drawing of the silo, showing the amount of product that he believed was still in the silo. He also explained that the bottom of the silo discharge was open, which would allow water to flow through. About an hour and a half after arrival, so about 12 minutes later, the fire department shift change was transpiring with the firefighters arriving on scene, 4 others leaving. This shift change included the arrival of Lieutenant Josette, who was killed. He's the firefighter who died in this incident.
All right, so L59 was stowed after shift change. Ladder 54 was put into position next to the silo configuration and reconnected to the water supply from the hydrant. Command arranged for the position of the firefighters for the operation as companies, Company 1, Company 2, Company 3 type of thing, for task level assignment and communication purposes. So at 2 hours and 12 minutes after arrival, Company 1 firefighter was positioned at Ladder 54's bucket to operate the standpipe, while a Company 3 lieutenant and Company 3 firefighter, which is the critically injured firefighter, were taken by the facility safety officer up at a set of stairs to reach the catwalk. Light, lazy white smoke and aerosolized dust was observed at the top of the silo and coming from the head house. Now, due to the smoke, the facility employee did not reach the catwalk, and both the Company 3 lieutenant and firefighter went on air using their SCBAs. Company 2 firefighters were positioned at the bottom of the silo to monitor the progress of the operation. 18 minutes after that, the Company 3 Lieutenant Josette and firefighter Kane reached the catwalk. Their 50-foot section of 3-inch hose line without a nozzle was connected to the standpipe in Ladder 54's bucket by the Company 1 firefighter. The Company 3 firefighters dropped the hose into the access hatch on top of the silo, and it was down far enough so that it would not push out of the hatch when it was actually charged up. They noticed light gray smoke now pushing out of the hatch, but no heat. 5 minutes after that, the Company 3 Lieutenant Josette and firefighter Kane radioed to command that they were in position and requested their hose line to be charged. After beginning to flow water into the silo, the surrounding smoke and dust began to suck back into the silo. 6 minutes later, command was transferred from Battalion 1 to Battalion 2, with all units being notified of the change by radio. Battalion 1 departed the scene. Company 2 firefighters entered the conveyor tunnel and noted warm water flowing from the bottom of the silo. They reported to command that they believed the operation was working. While working in the head house, both the Company 3 lieutenant and firefighter used their SCBAs.
I was just going to say, so when they opened up this 3-inch line that was just hanging in the top, that line would have been just whipping around inside, right? You've seen open butt hoses. And it was causing enough draft, if you will, to reverse the flow in the silo. So we've all been to fires where the smoke stops coming out and goes in, and we know what that can mean.
Well, the thing is the product had been burning in that downward direction. The heated product is lower, the cooler product is higher, and they'd stopped that when they were flowing water up, but now they're flowing water down, so the fire's going deeper into the bridge, if you will, and causing all that disturbance of air from that hose whipping around inside that atmosphere, which is a perfect storm for combustible dust.
Yeah, it's one thing to see it from our point of view. It's another, they're there, they're doing what they think they should be doing. seems to be working. Radio report says it's working. Okay, awesome. Let's keep doing this. Standing back.
That's why we
ding,
do the
ding,
podcast. Ding. If you get a silo, beware.
And in fairness to the incident commander, I don't know how much of this was communicated to him. Like, we've got reverse flow in the silo now of air. Smoke and air is being sucked into the top of the silo. He can't see it because there's a head house on top. Would he even notice that the smoke and dust coming out of the head house has stopped? Probably not, because it may not have. It might have been fully charged up in there. So we don't know how much communications was part of this, but certainly tactics and certainly the event will prove it. But the tactics were incorrect, and nobody seemed to catch on that.
And it's a new IC, so he didn't know what was happening before. They just transferred command, so he never had those visual cues and information from firefighters from before. What was transferred, we don't know.
We don't know the
handle. Silo, we're trying to put it out.
Yeah, and new crews too, right? New guys on scene, so everybody was new.
Yep. That's what happened in Shirley Towers in the UK. They transferred command 2 or 3 times while the firefighters were inside the building, and they lost 2 firefighters in the apartment, and they died. The transfer command is a watch-out situation for firefighters on scene.
Well, 10 minutes after that, or 3 hours after the initial call, Company 2 firefighters checked the conveyor tunnel and again noted that the water was now cool with no smoke or steam observed. They radioed the Company 3 lieutenant for a status check on top of the silo. An order was given to move the hose line around to saturate more product. Upon moving the hose line, Company 3 Lieutenant Josette observed a puff of smoke. Company 2 firefighters then heard a sudden roar from above and observed a pressurized whiteout, which is a stream of white smoke in the conveyor tunnel. And at the same time, command walked to ladder 54 and a very loud, low tone or compression explosion sound was heard from the top of the silo. So just a moment later is when that occurred. The concrete debris began to rain down at the incident. Command then observed Company Officer Lieutenant Josette fall from the edge of the silo, land on the fiberglass awning below, and then onto the ground. A Company 2 firefighter immediately performed patient assessment and resuscitation efforts while a mayday was called. 4 minutes after that, command requested an additional ambulance be sent to the scene and an emergency medical helicopter. Command updated public service answering point that CPR was in progress for the firefighter who suffered from the long fall. Company 3 Lieutenant Josette was then transported to a local hospital. At this time, all firefighter operations stopped, and the Company 1 firefighter brought ladder 54's bucket to the ground. Accountability was performed, which resulted in noting that the Company 3 firefighter cane was missing. Company 2 firefighters responded to the top of the silo area using access stairs to search. They are unable to locate the missing firefighter.
This is just like that other incident in episode 35. One firefighter fell off the top, the other one fell in. This is like very much similar.
A little deja vu for episode, was that 35?
Within a couple of minutes, Battalion 1 received a telephone call from the facility command requesting him to return because there had been an accident. Upon his arrival on scene, he was briefed on the situation by the facility command, noting that 1 firefighter was transported to hospital and another was missing. Command was transferred from Battalion 2 back to Battalion 1. During the search for the Company 3 firefighter, Battalion 2 noted that there was very little amount of concrete debris on the ground near the silo. Most of the roof materials after the explosion had fallen inward into the silo. Thinking the missing firefighter may be inside the silo of the same effect, basically, Battalion 2 requested facility safety officer to arrange for a crane to drop a basket into the silo to conduct a search. So that's good. He's asking for more resources. Plan B. The member of the contractor crew then updated Battalion 2 about a side access hatch on the silo that could be used to aid in the search. Upon opening the hatch, they observed the semi-conscious Company 3 firefighter Kane sitting on the silage against the inside silo wall. Wow, that is just so fortunate that he was right near that access hatch.
But he fell over 70 feet.
He did, which is bad, but at least they could get at him. right?
Yeah.
If he had been
80,
between
80
there,
feet.
if he'd been 88 feet, I think the article said, but if he had been above that, they wouldn't have been able to get at him from the side or below that. So they did not observe any fire in the silo. A second ambulance and helicopter were requested by command, as we mentioned before. 36 minutes after Battalion 1 was called back to the scene, command noted to the dispatch that they had a victim who was talking and ongoing efforts were underway for extracting the victim from inside the silo. Firefighters began unbolting the side access hatch to gain a larger opening. So this was like a fairly big opening with a small hatch in the middle that you could just peek in. So that's what
Yeah.
they peeked in through the small hatch, and then they unbolted the whole flange so that they could get a bigger
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah. So this is the 13-foot high hatch at the 13-foot level that the facility didn't want them to open earlier. That's
Yeah,
what this is.
right, exactly. Yet the contractors were like, sure, you can open that. Let's see. Fire Company 3 firefighter Kane then crawled on his own to the opening and was secured in a Stokes basket, which was then lowered to a stretcher of an awaiting ambulance. Company 3 firefighter Kane was then transported to the landing zone for helicopter for transport to the local hospital. After both firefighters were transported, facility employees noted that smoke had begun to emanate from the bottom of the silo again. Additional fire units from Mutual Aid Department arrived on scene. 4 hours and 45 minutes after time of call, they began firefighting operations again, changing tactics multiple times until the fire was fully extinguished. It was 3:50 in the afternoon, so the initial call came in at 6.
Yeah. So almost 12 hours later.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the fire origin and explosion cause. Anyway, NIOSH investigators, talking about the fire side of things, interviewed the corn processing facility employees who noted that multiple incipient stage fires had actually occurred in the silos over the previous 10 years. So these would be incipient stage fires where the fire department was not called. Silage is a fermented feed that is made up from a high moisture plant material such as grasses, corns, maize, using the oxygen excluding conditions of a silo. So this is a general discussion. When a silo was filled with these materials, the aerobic respiration from the silage, aerobic meaning air contacting from the silage, eventually produces heat and consumes oxygen in the silo, which then results in fermentation and depletion of air, of the oxygen. The fermentation process also produces heat. It produces preservative acids, and this continues until the silo becomes stable. So it stops fermenting and it just sits there. So when the silage is stored at the recommended moisture content, the water present in the silage will help to absorb any excess heat generated and keeps the silage from overheating and combusting. But if the silage is too dry, the heat cannot dissipate fast enough, and the internal temperature in the silage could rise until spontaneous combustion occurs. The oxygen in the silo could support a smoldering fire, which in most silo fires spreads slowly, taking days, weeks, or even months until it reaches the top of the silage. So if it starts down low, where most of the compression is and the heat is, it burns its way up, very slowly. So kind of like a pellet stove, if you will. So this is all the case if your silo has available oxygen, right? So now talking a little bit about the explosion side of things, the dust explosion. So an independent root cause investigation was done, which included an engineering analysis, and it was conducted by a third-party private organization in 2019, somebody who knew about these things. A third-party organization developed 2 explosion hypotheses as potential causes for the incident. It's not known exactly which one. But regardless, the result was the same, that there was a combustible dust explosion and a combustible gas explosion. It could have been both. So the combustible dust explosion might have occurred if dust inside the silo became suspended and there's sufficient oxygen and it is ignited by the heat of the smoldering fire in the silage. So you got to have the right mixture of oxygen and fuel and to get the right ratio, in other words, within a combustible range. So, but in this case, the fuel is in the form of fine dust. There could have also been a combustible gas explosion, which occurred in the silo when sufficient oxygen enters the silo and there's an ignition source is introduced into the explosive atmosphere in the silo headspace, which is produced by the accumulation of combustible gases from the smoldering fire in the silage. So if you're putting water in the top and stopping the breathing of the silo, it's going to accumulate dust. It's going to accumulate combustible gases. and you're also bringing in oxygen at the same time. There's oxygen in the silo. So you could get to the point where you have just the right mixture. So this organization who was doing the investigation identified the root cause of the explosion to be the application of water through the top hatches of the silo that was done in an attempt to suppress the fire. A literature review was also done, and engineering analysis determined that the suppression activities that applied water to a smoldering silo fire have the potential to exacerbate the explosion hazards present. I would go back again to our episode 35, the 2 silo fire explosions that happened, both of them, same mechanism as here. Open hatches and the application of water can entrain oxygen into the silo headspace. For a combustible gas explosion, the introduction of oxygen can bring the atmosphere inside the silo into an explosive range, and with an ignition source such as an open smoldering fire in the silage, that can cause an explosion. Further, the application of water can stir up dust within the silage and cause it to become suspended in an explosive concentration. Now, I can hear people thinking, you're putting water on the silage. How can you have dust? It's all wet. Like, you can't have dust. It's wet. There's water everywhere. But I would tell you that you can, because the water is only on the surface. And you want to prove it to yourself? Go get yourself a cup. Rinse it out so it's still wet on the inside. Get yourself a couple big scoops of hot chocolate powder, dump it in the cup, and then pour hot water in on the top. And you're going to find it's all stuck in the bottom. Take your spoon and stir it, and you're going to see dry powder come up to the surface of the cup. So even though it's underwater, you can see that there's still dry material. When you got this hose beating around in there, and the incident commander told them, move the hose around. So what's happening is you're knocking off chunks of this bridge, which are composed of dry material in the middle. And when it falls, it breaks up. You're going to create dust. You've got lots of turbulence in there. And you can see how that could happen.
That's a great analogy. Now it makes me want a cup of hot chocolate, right, Dennis? What do you think? Yeah.
On a cold day like today, why not? But it's funny though. That was good, Denny, because as you're talking about it, I'm visualizing that, right? You know, how many times have we done that? And you're like, you got globs of chocolate, powdered chocolate, and you try to stir the heck out of it. You still will always have dry matter unless you can really mix it up.
Yeah. Thanks for humoring me, Dennis. I appreciate that. Not like my cousin over there.
I thought that was good. That was really good.
It's true, though.
So I was going to mention, so episode 35, the other 2 silo explosions that we've talked about quite a few times, it's kind of odd here because the one fatality in Ohio was in 1985. The second one was in 2003, and now we have this one in 2019. So we're having a firefighter line of duty death from a silo fire every 10 years or so, 15 years. So, and of course, if you look I did some research, of course, into the OSHA rules and ADM. You looked at some articles as well where we're researching, and they've had silo explosions all the time across, very common, unfortunately. So, it's just terrible. So that's why we need to understand these things as we're responding to calls at these facilities.
Yeah. So OSHA did their own investigation. So, of course, they're responsible for issues with violation of health and safety rules at the state level. And so they're looking at, what the employer did and possibly what some of the employees did. But their issue also is the fact that this is a death. It's a work-related death. So and I won't get into all the information because it's basically a repeat. But one of the main things that came out of this was the fact that the facility basically guided the fire department to not open the side hatch and apply water directly to the bridge, but rather to go to the top of the silo. And this turns out to have been a bad idea. And their concern over removing the side hatch and having burning materials fall out was based on the facility management's not understanding of where the level of material in the silage was, where the contractor did know. And also there was actually a small inspection port that could have been removed to reveal whether there was really a risk of burning material being directly behind the hatch. and nobody thought of opening that. Plus, I would also say that this hatch would be metal, and a tick camera would be highly instructive. But that's not mentioned either.
That's sort of like the ship that hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and I watched the very long NTSB board meetings to pass the report. And what they recommended was checking wiring on ships with thermal imaging cameras because it may have detected the fault of that one wire that wasn't connecting. It would have been cooler than the rest of the wires. Yeah. So, it's just we have to use tech science and technology. And OSHA said that, seconds before the explosion in the grain silo, an Archer Daniels Midland official told the Clinton Fire Department that he believed water could have been applied through a side hatch, as the Clinton Fire Department had initially planned, according to incident narrative report by the Iowa Occupational Health and Safety Administration. So actually one person, so they didn't have unity in their direction. ADM officials had adamantly advised against opening the hatches, but yet some of their staff said, yeah, you could do that. And you often get that with industrial sites is you get this divided as, I remember we always do those propane tanker rollover things, right? And one guy would say, oh yeah, it's fine. It's safe. That tanker's fine. You can roll it back over loaded. And the other guy's going, no, this is really dangerous. And you're going like, who do I listen to?
Because they didn't pre-plan an incident in a silo. It looks like that to me, and would have had if then this that. That's what pre-planning should be all about. Looking at the scenario possibilities. Doesn't look like it to me. Or if they did do that, nobody bothered to open the book.
The OSHA report says they hauled nearly 60 tons of debris for 2 or 3 days before they called the fire department from the cleaning out that the contractor had done. And then eventually they said, we don't need you anymore. It's good. And then it didn't go well. Recommendations. So here's from NIOSH. Recommendation 1, train firefighters and fire officers in the hazards associated with different types of silos and the appropriate firefighting tactics, including any unique hazards posed by silo contents. The discussion is none of the firefighters interviewed by NIOSH investigators noted training in specific hazards associated with silos or the appropriate firefighting tactics for silo fires. The fire department did not have any written guidelines for silo fires. Additionally, the corn processing facilities did not communicate the hazards presented by the incident silo's contents or the appropriate fire suppression methods as dictated by the occupancy fire safety plan. You're in a city full of silos. You drive by them every day.
This facility, these were not the only silos on the facility either.
Oh, no.
There were
They
others.
had all kinds of companies there with silos. NIOSH goes on to say since 1985, they've investigated 5 incidents of firefighter fatalities and injuries resulting from silo fires and explosions since 85, we covered a few of them. Each incident, NIOSH recommended that firefighters be trained on the hazards associated with and the appropriate firefighting tactics for silo. I live in an agricultural area, so does Dennis. We can drive around, take a 20-minute drive in the country, and I'm sure we'd see 15 or 20 silos in our area at least, right? Because we've got dairy farms, and dairy farms have silos, although more and more are doing the silage on the ground now, but getting away from the silos, but they're still there.
But Paul, we have those mega grain terminals, those mega silos. There's
they're fine. It's just wheat, canola, and
and drying facilities, right? Drying facilities.
Right.
And elevator facilities and huge. I mean, it's amazing, eh? We've been doing this for 150 years, and we're still figuring it out.
The existing literature on silo fires and explosions has remained unchanged for more than 40 years based upon the science of the conditions created by the design and contents. I underline this for emphasis. Typical firefighting tactics can cause unintentionally create conditions for an explosion in a silo by creating dust clouds, introducing air, applying incompatible extinguishing methods, and using equipment that can become an ignition source. Additionally, the building characteristics of the silo prevent vulnerabilities that require special considerations for planning and firefighting activities.
So, what was driving them to put this fire out? They had, 8 silos. They were all connected. They could have used any one they wanted. They could have just closed this one up and let it sit for 2 months. They were messing with it for 2 months or whatever it was. Just close it up, nitrogen blanket if they wanted it to, and just continue to run the facility with. It wasn't running properly anyway, so it was essentially out of service. Just good advice would have basically told them to.
We got business. We got to get business going here. We got to up our production for the shareholders.
I bet you they probably had a customer or a barge that was specifically assigned sitting there, just like when we have a rail fire and the rail wants, or a train derailment and the rail wants to get back up and running. But I'll bet you it was all about the dollars, about moving that product, getting it out in the barge, getting it to market or something like that.
One of the most dangerous hazards presented by silos is combustible dust explosions. Since 1980, there have been over 200 combustible dust incidents at industrial facilities that have led to the deaths of injuries and workers, according to OSHA in 2024. And we actually invited my friend Chris Clooney, who does the combustible dust safety podcast, to join us, but we never did hear back from him. But he has a podcast specifically about combustible dust. It's everywhere. I used to deal with it in Clearwater and in Fort Saskatchewan, especially Clearwater, because we had sawmills and all these other kind of buildings, and they had fires all the time, and they would never call us. And we're going like, guys, we need to talk. We need to help each other.
But they hired the contractor in mid-October, November, December, 3 months prior to this incident. They knew this silo was a problem.
Yep, had a bridge. Didn't know it was burning. Had a bridge.
Yeah.
Combustible dust is a solid material composed of distinct particles which present a fire or explosion hazard when suspended in air or some other oxidizing medium over a range of concentration. Dust explosions often occur in a series where the first explosion stirs up the dust that had settled in other areas of the confined space, like a silo, and results in additional explosions that are larger and stronger. These dusts are often byproducts of organic materials that are finely ground for a dust explosion to occur. 5 conditions must be present. There must be combustible dust suspended in the air, particle concentration within an explosive range, ignition source might be present. It was burning, so we had an ignition source. Dust is in a confined space, like a silo, and the oxygen content is sufficient to support construction because they had left the doors open. Combustion. And so this is the problem. And if you go onto the Chemical Safety Board website or you look at any of these big dust explosions, there was just another one somewhere in the States that killed a couple of people, blew the head off the top of the building. I watched a video on it a few months ago. We have to beware of these things. The possibility of a combustible dust explosion is a critical hazard that dictates modifying firefighting tactics. The explosibility of a dust cloud is impossible to measure during an incident. Gas meters that measure explosives and flammabilities cannot measure these ranges for combustible dust. Silos also present a hazard of structural collapse, and the integrity of the silo throughout the incident should be considered. The firefighting tactical considerations. One of the most important factors for firefighters to consider with silo tires is time. Time is especially important when dealing with an oxygen-limiting silo whose design reduces the ingress of oxygen to support combustion. Unlike when other dry materials and flammable structure fires burn, silos burn slowly, days, weeks, months. As such, there's often ample time at scene to analyze the situation, develop a plan for extinguishing the fire. This includes time to meet with facility owners and collect all pertinent information regarding the silo. There's no rush. It's a hazmat, basically. So stop and be safe. First evaluate. There's several firefighting tactical considerations for fires in oxygen-limiting silos. Size up and hazard recognition. Determine the type of silo, the location of the silo or unloading opening, utility shutdowns, lockout, tagout, and all additional openings and location of exposures. Determine the content type and amount in the silo. Determine the length of time the silo fire has lasted. Fire burning for an extended period of time can create void spaces in the contents. Observe smoke. It's like a peat fire underground, right? Observe smoke conditions and location if present. Smoke emitting from top hatches of an oxygen-limiting silo dictates that the top hatches should not be closed or secured because you could get pressure, I guess, which would lead to an explosion. Utilize thermal imaging devices to determine the location and the amount of smoldering silage, because the silo would be warmer in certain areas because of the smoldering inside.
Extinguishment actions. All firefighter activities that introduced air into the silo must be avoided. And that also includes no attempt should be made to enter, breach, or directly extinguish the fire in the silo. That also includes water or foam should not be directed into the fire through the top hatches, and attempting to drown the fire with a deluge of water is not effective as the water will not penetrate deeply into the silage, but run off afterwards and down the side walls or the interior walls, because water will always follow the path of least resistance by bypassing the hot areas of silage. Allowing an oxygen limiting silo to smother itself out by not opening the top or bottom hatches for 2 weeks has been shown to be effective in some cases. The facility may have partially or completely emptied the silo with extinguishment of silage after removal from the silo, and then consult with the silo manufacturer for step-by-step instructions or recommendations on how to extinguish fires in their silos. Some safety considerations. Any attempt to extinguish a fire inside an oxygen-limiting silo may introduce oxygen into the silo via natural oxygen egress through openings or through the water. Like they'd opened a few, and the wind was still 5 miles per hour coming out of I think it was the southwest or the southeast. And we all know that when we have something like that, even just a little bit of wind coming from the back can actually make quite a difference on how much oxygen that's getting. What else? It also talks a bit about firefighters should stay off oxygen limiting silo that is shaky, noisy, hot, smoking heavily, or that's been opened because that allows the oxygen egress within the past few days. Silos are considered permit required confined spaces due to being large enough for a body to enter, but have limited access, which has a potential for hazardous atmosphere and contains a potential for engulfment. Such as, silos may contain IDHL or immediately dangerous to life and health atmosphere due to the presence of combustible gases, dust, vapors, and toxic agents in accordance with 29 CFR, 1910.272. Silos should be treated as a confined space, and any planned entry should utilize considerations provided with NFPA 350, which is the Guide for Safe Confined Entry and Work.
I mean, this is not unlike what we're seeing with some of the ro-ro ferries these days, with fires on a ro-ro ferry. This was a factor in the New Jersey deaths of the 2 firefighters in the ferry, because what those ships have is they have CO2 flooding systems, and that's their fire suppression. But you can't open a door if you've used the CO2 flooding system, because 1, you're letting the CO2 out, you're letting oxygen in, and 2, it's an ideal H atmosphere. So it's similar inside the silo. We have to think of that because it's confined space and something's burning in there.
So recommendation number 2, develop a pre-incident plan for all high hazard occupancies in their jurisdiction. Part of it, of course, is you got to identify it as a high hazard occupancy. That'd be a good start. Anyway, discussion. At this incident, the fire department maintained a specialized box alarm assignment for high hazard occupancies in their jurisdiction, which included the corn processing facility. The policy dictated which fire and EMS units from which station would respond to emergencies at the facility. That included fire resources, EMS resources, and safety resources. Directions for responses were further detailed for specific routine call areas in the facility into which the emergency was reported and what entrances responding units would utilize, for instance. So pretty standard, or should be standard stuff for responding to particularly large industrial sites. So this was a group H2 occupancy, and because of combustible dusts. In this incident, the corn processing facility produced and stored corn gluten feed pellets. Agricultural products such as these pellets can generate dust, and do generate dust. Gosh, my kitty litter generates dust, and it's corn-based, which can form explosive mixtures in the air. The independent root cause investigation of this incident included an explosibility study for the pellets stored in the incident silo. The study confirmed that the dust generated from the pellets is combustible with consistent explosibility parameters of similar based corn products. Okay, in English, it behaved like those products behave. There's nothing highly variable between corn-based gluten products. Whoever they are, they're all basically the same and are all just as combustible, is essentially what that says. So, in other words, you can plan for these things. Fire departments should identify combustible dust hazards in advance as part of their routine pre-incident planning to identify appropriate firefighting actions and avoid creating additional hazards for the fire department and corn processing staff, facility staff that are on site during the fire or other emergencies. Hey, what's in those silos? Oh, that's corn stuff. Oh, let me do some research. That's combustible dust material. We need to be aware of this. So that's the type of thinking that should be going on when you're doing your tour, driving by, and somebody says, oh, there's the silos. You should be asking questions. Pre-incident planning for industrial facilities allows the fire department to engage with employees. Who knows the most about the facility? The employees. They don't know everything, but they know most about their facility. And how to collect facility-specific information that would not otherwise be obvious and could be acted upon when arriving for an emergency. Pre-incident planning also allows for routine training activities and drills with high hazard occupancy facilities.
Recommendation number 3, ensure the applicable fire and life safety codes are enforced at high hazard occupancies, such as agricultural and or food processing facilities. In the discussion, NIOSH investigators interviewed corn processing facility employees who noted that multiple incipient stage fires had occurred in the silos over the past 10 years. And like you said, Denny, I mean, who's going to know? The employees. They're the ones that are there working with the stuff every day. They see this stuff. They have a small incipient fire. They report it. They say, just deal with it. They deal with it. So they've seen this before, and they might have had some knowledge that could have been useful at this time.
Well, they probably also had dealt with it in a certain fashion. They had developed internally, hey, we did this and that worked, and we did that and that worked. So they did that multiple times. So this is just one more of those, we did that the last time, we'll do that this time type incidents. Except that's not
okay. Recommendation number 4, properly operate and maintain their silos and implement the applicable requirements of NFPA 61, which is the standard for the prevention of fires and dust explosions in agricultural and food processing facilities. So the discussion around that is, you know, the corn processing facility discovered a 15 to 20 foot thick bridge of pellets near the bottom of silo number 2, 3 months prior to the incident. That bridge prevented the flow of the corn gluten feed pellets from some of the silo's discharges. The facility, you know, they'd hired contractors to remove the bridge of pellets and to clean the silo. Not just one, but they hired two different contractors. So these facilities should routinely inspect and maintain all equipment to ensure safe operation and condition. So this includes using the silo's manufacturer's recommended proper maintenance procedures to ensure the integrity of their oxygen limiting factors. In this incident, the contractor crew left hatches open overnight, which allowed for the ingress of oxygen that supported smoldering combustion of the silage. NFPA 61 provides requirements for agricultural and food processing facilities to manage and mitigate fire and explosion hazards of combustible dust or related particulate solids. The standard explains that owners and operators of these facilities should identify fire and explosion hazards associated with their facility and potential consequences. Now, Denny, I saw you were going to say something. You know, I always tell my students, this is always the test answer. If you get an NFPA test, as per manufacturer's recommendations, right? Did anybody go back to those recommendations?
You know, they talk about the hatches shouldn't have been left open on an oxygen limiting silo. That's what they're talking about here, how you would manage it. But I don't think the facility and or the contractor considered that an in-service silo at that point. It was under maintenance. So leaving the hatches open might have been done deliberately to ensure that there was a gas-free environment inside that silo, right? Because they were working in that silo and they were working in a place that would have required, should have required confined space entry protocols in place and safeties and so forth. So to do that, you would tend to, you know, make spaces safe and leave them open so they would continue to breathe. But part of that confined space ventilation processes to make sure. And I worked in a refinery for 17 years, and one of the things that you had to be careful of is when you made a space safe, you had to make sure that it didn't become unsafe afterwards. So any connection was blinded, not just a valve closed, but blinded. So the connections, there was solid steel plates, which nothing's getting through, bolted in place, and so forth. And hatches were opened and all that other kind of stuff. But you were always, when you came back in the morning, you always did atmosphere tests in those facilities because there might have been vapors or something unsafe from somewhere else that got brought in there, sucked in some way or another. So these hatches might have been left open for those reasons deliberately, not thinking about
You
the
know,
fire
and they
aspect.
probably weren't there. Like you said, they thought it was under maintenance, it's out of service. They need to do some work on it without giving thought that there's actually product in there, though, that could be doing some sort of chemical reaction or something that could be occurring because it was an oxygen eliminating silo. And they've just left all those hatches open. So, I mean, it's one thing to leave it open for a little bit, and it's another thing to leave it open overnight, right?
But they knew it was on fire even that night when they left
Yeah.
because it had been dropping burning materials for days.
Yeah. The last one on recommendation for you, I'll finish this up and then somebody else. NFPA 61 provides that wet or dry standpipes shall be provided in all operating areas of headhouses and storage galleries that are over 50 feet above grade. Additionally, the standard advises facilities to consider the installation of spark or ember detection and extinguishing systems. And again, this was almost 90 feet tall, right?
95.
Yep. You know, here's some good news, though, from this as a result. The post-incident fire department prevention actions. After this incident, the fire department implemented changes to their incident response and fireground operations. These changes were based on the fire department's critique of the incident that occurred on January 5th. They built an industrial fire response standard operating guideline. Training and EMS director management developed a finalized SOG to provide personnel and fire officers consistent operating guidelines when responding to structural type fires and other emergencies within industrial settings, such as the corn processing facility in this incident. They also developed training and implementation of the same SOG for high-risk occupancies. The fire department routinely trains now with high-risk occupancy facilities in their jurisdiction as part of their pre-incident planning. This includes simulated responses that incorporate facility employees and management to ensure appropriate hazard communications and effective incident stabilization with facility-specific hazards. So that's great if you can go do training at the facility with their teams. I know Nova and Dow and many of the companies here in central Alberta, they take municipal firefighters to go train in Texas or Vermilion, and they have them come and train on their sites, which is really, really important, right? To build that relationship and that embedded knowledge with the people. There was some additional resources provided in the NIOSH report. So if you want to look up the NIOSH report, that was 219-01. And in the appendixes, there's a silo initial assessment worksheet that was courtesy of Rescue Tech LLC. And there's another appendix, which is an example of an industrial fire response SOG, courtesy of the Clinton Fire Department. So these are in the NIOSH report. You can go; they're publicly available, and you can use them as a basis for your agency.
So we've talked in the past about how more and more now we're seeing consequences of LODDs that involved lawsuits and other sanctions, and there were a few that arose out of this one. So the firefighter who died in this incident was married, and the firefighter's widow sued ADM, alleging a lot of pre-incident inactions or actions that were taken by contractors and taken by the company itself, alleging, and the wife of the firefighter who was seriously injured also had separate legal actions, and so the lawsuits are ongoing. Right now, we're unable to determine what the results of those lawsuits are, but they were ongoing at the time and maybe been resolved by now. But they're seeking damages, of course, and a lot of the information I think relating to what happened prior to this incident comes out as part of those lawsuits, as well as part of the OSHA investigation.
Speaking of the OSHA investigations, Denis, so OSHA did fine ADM and also the one construction company. So they issued five
BWC,
BWC construction. ADM was issued 5 violations of Iowa OSHA for a total of $55,894, and the construction company was issued 1 violation of $7,000. So those cases are closed and those fines have been administered. In addition, the city, who ended up paying for the medical expenses for the 2 firefighters, has put a lien against ADM for $500,000 or more.
but no, it's against the widows and the survivors. It's against the firefighters.
Oh,
That's where the lien is. So if they receive any compensation due to their lawsuits, over $250,000 of those compensations the city wants.
right. And I mean, and this is something we're starting to see. Like we just had this, the lawsuit in the States where the fire chief and deputy chief were sued, and the families were awarded $31 million by the courts, although it's gone to appeal now for negligence during the call. So we're starting to see more and more of this, and rightly so. In fact, is we need to be accountable for what we do at calls and decisions we make.
But that's kind of harsh, that the city would turn around and put a lien against its employees' estates to recover the cost of medical expenses that they expended looking after their employees. Did they not have insurance, medical insurance? Like that's cold.
Well, the city covered it somehow. That must be self-insured medical or something with the city.
Yeah, it could
be. The city paid for the medical. Yeah. Or the insurers. Or the insurers went after the city for compensation.
Caught my attention. This is private care Medicare.
Firefighter Kane had fallen 88 feet into the silo, suffering severe injuries, along with nerve damage and bruising to the heart. He also had a brain bruise or a concussion, a broken right arm, dislocated elbow, lacerated liver and heart. He was hospitalized for 3 weeks, eventually did return to duty with the fire department. And the one article I read actually is today he is a police officer. He has changed careers and he's gone to be a police officer in the same area there somewhere. Another very detailed episode. Hopefully everybody finds them enjoyable and they learn something from them. That's why we do them. Thank you for joining us. We hope you continue to find these informative and interesting. Give us a like or a thumbs up. Feel free to comment on the episodes. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're available on YouTube as well. We'll post pictures from the NIOSH report on our social feeds. My last words are, let's be safe out there. I'm sure Denis and Dennis will have some last words as well.
This is the third silo fatality incident that we've done. And the fundamentals of each of those incidents is the same. And we need to learn from these things. And the main message coming out of this is know your hood. If you've got risks in your hood, you need to know them and know how to deal with them properly. So pre-plan, train, have your SOGs, and sometimes barging in and doing the firefighting thing is not the way to go. You got to think of how to do it the right way. It doesn't matter what the company wants. It's what you need to do.
Well, that's a good point, Danny. It's interesting reading on some of these lawsuits and then the petition about how it was acknowledged that the company dissuaded Incident Command to not open those hatches to take a look. So then I'm wondering about Incident Command. Like if it's my scene, I'm gonna listen to your advice. And you said earlier, Paul, like who do you listen to?
But there's a subject matter. The industry is supposed to be the subject. I was always hesitant. In fact, I got criticized for it quite a few times in my career. I was very hesitant to listen to employees of the company because they become immune to the risk, right? They work with this stuff every day, and so they don't even think of the risk anymore. I come in from the outside with my hazard mentality, and I'm thinking totally opposite. And so somewhere in the middle, I suppose, is is the answer.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely
Well,
right. They told them not
with
to do that hatch.
with incident command, we're supposed to gather information constantly and then assess whether it's factual or if we can use it. But either way, it's too bad this occurred, and hopefully one day we'll learn about how to deal with a silo fire in all departments just across Canada, United States. So here's to a safe and healthy and happy 2026, everybody.
Yeah,
Amen.
put us out of work. Thanks.